Happy Jazz Festival, everybody. Yeah. I'm Tom D'Antoni. I'm the editor of Oregon Music News. And once again, this year, we're podcasting all of the jazz conversations. It's been a great festival for jazz. It's been a great jazz festival for music and also the jazz conversations. If you have not heard the Barry Harris jazz conversation.
Wow, I want to hear that.
You got to hear it. You got to. Yeah. I was talking to somebody last night who has listened to it 3 times already.
Yeah.
And you know the memorable conversation with Gerald Wilson and Sweet Baby James Benton, Thera Memory, and Mel Brown was just wonderful. They've all been wonderful, including the drummer roundtable yesterday with Louis Nash and Jack DeJohnette and Joey Barron and Chris Brown and Carlton Jackson. Anyway, they're all great, and they're all available on OregonMusicNews.com. And iTunes, as this will be later on today. So I'd like to introduce our guest today. If I started to list all the stuff he's done, we'd be done. I mean, it would take the rest of the time.
We could do that, then I could just sit here and rest.
You could, since you just got off a plane.
Yeah.
Steve Bernstein is here. He's the leader of Sexmob, which used to be 2 words, but now is 1 word.
Yeah, we're a brand now. We don't need So I figured we're just Sexmob, and that way we don't have all the confusion about sex, and people don't have to get embarrassed because it's not anything about sex now. It's just Sexmob.
It still says sex.
Yeah, but it's connected to the word mob, so it's Sexmob. It's not.
Which
sex.
is that? Well, that's better?
Well, it's just 1 word. It's Sexmob.
Okay. It still has 2 connections, sex and mob.
That's your problem.
Okay, that's my problem. I'm sorry. Sexmob will be playing tonight at the Winningstat, and you'll be doing the tunes from your new album.
Yes, sir.
Fellini, the music of Nino Rota.
Right.
It's circus,
cinema, and spaghetti.
And spaghetti.
And the reason is when I was doing the research for the record, I decided to not watch the films. Yeah. I just listened to the music and I read Fellini's memoirs because I just felt that's the way I wanted to do it. And there was an amazing quote. I mean, I'd seen the films, not all of them, but I'd seen most of them. Uh-huh. And there was this and the memoirs were really enlightening. We'll get into that. But there was this great quote when he says, my 4 greatest influences are sex, cinema, spaghetti, and circus. And I realized, well, we got the sex part taken care of in the name, as you pointed out. So we were left with cinema, circus, and spaghetti. Yeah.
Why didn't you watch the movies?
I just felt that, it's interesting. You said you didn't want to talk about things I've done, but, I've done these Jewish records, and when I did the Jewish records, people said, well, did you, when you transcribed these songs, were you interested in what the prayers were? And I said, no. To me, it's all music. And I really want to approach the songs for the songs. And I didn't really want to think about how the songs were in the scenes. I just wanted to take the music as pure music and work with it from there. And I knew what the films were. I've seen the films. And I just wanted to deal with the music as music. Because I always tell people, like, that's my world. That's my zone. And I do so much different kind of music because for me, music is music, and I don't care, if I'm playing with Levon Helm or Sonny Simmons or Linda Ronstadt or Don Byron or Galactic or Sexmob. It's music, and if it's good music, that I want to deal with it on the level of pure music. And so that's why I just wanted to deal. Like, I got all the soundtrack records and Nina, collections of Nina Rota's works, and just started listening and let that dictate where I was going to go with this project.
But you must have had the scenes in your head.
In a way, but that's that's in a sense that's neither here nor there because the idea of this, like a lot of people have done Nina Rota. It's not like I'm the first person to do Nina Rota's music. And one of the interesting things is that it was Hal Wilner's Nina Rota record, which kind of changed my life a little bit when I was, 19 years old, because Hal Wilner made this incredible record called Amarcord Nina Rota. And it was came out in 1981, I believe. And this is a record. Now we're used to this kind of thing, but it had Jackie Byard. It had Carla Bley. It had, I believe, Steve Lacy was on it. It was Bill Frisell's first recording. It was Wynton Marsalis's first recording. Henry Threadgill was on it. And Blondie was on it. Debbie, and this was like, none. And so for me, I bought this record. And I was like, this is what I've been waiting for. For my generation, it was like opening the doors of perception for the generation before us. The idea that there's no barriers anymore. If you love music, you can take all these things that people used to think, well, Blondie's one kind of music, and Jackie Byard's another kind of music, and Carl Bley's another kind of music, and whatever. And the tracks with Wynton and Branford were done by William Eaton, who was a very famous R&B arranger who had a writing team with Ralph McDonald and wrote Just the Two of Us. So Hal's had created like this unified vision of music, and I ended up working with Hal's been. I've been working with him for 20 years now as an arranger. So that kind of was an interesting thing that, here's a person who changed my life, and we eventually ended up working very closely together. But I always felt that these melodies, I didn't really need to see the scenes. What I needed to do was figure out how can I translate these melodies into my language. Because one of the things about Sexmob is we have a very specific language. We've been together for 17 years. And we've created this very unique language. And the idea was take these themes and I've always been interested in melodies that have universal appeal, which is why I love Ellington, which is why I love prayer music, which is why I love Count Basie, which is why I play Bond themes, which is why I play songs that were like international hits, like ABBA songs, the Macarena. I like to play a song where I don't care where I am in the world, people are going to recognize the melody. Because we're going to play it a way they never heard it, but I want them to be able to have something to hold on to.
Okay, it's one thing it's always been difficult for people to do is to say exactly what it is that you do, because we don't want to say reimagine because that sounds like Disney, and we want to say reinterpret. Maybe that's it. We don't want to say deconstruct because that's like I think that's a negative thing. What do you call it, or do you call it?
I don't really call it. Yeah. That's always been. People even ask me, like, when people go to the airport and they go like, "Oh, what style of music do you play?" And I say, "Well, I guess you could call it jazz." I mean, anyone who plays the trumpet and loves Louis Armstrong, what you do is jazz. But they say, what's your band like? I still, 17 years later, I don't really know what to say. I mean, it's a lot easier when I'm working for other people because I can say what their music is. But it's in a sense it's if you think about the fact that jazz music, with the exception of people who are true jazz composers, Ellington, Mingus, Jelly Roll Morton, and there's not been that many real composers in jazz. Most jazz musicians have played popular songs and interpreted them in their own styles. And what they've done is they've taken their tones, their harmonic conception, the melodies of their day, and their personal rhythms, and they've played these songs. And that goes for Louis Armstrong, that goes for Lester Young, that goes for Charlie Parker, that goes for John Coltrane. They took popular songs, but when Lester Young, and even as great a composer as Dizzy was, people always think about something like All the Things You Are, which was that beautiful introduction he wrote. Be-dee-doom, boom, be-dee-doom, be-dee-doom, be-dee-dee-doom. Now, if you listen to the original All the Things You Are, it's like la, 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 la. Dizzy took it and went dee-dee-ding, boom, dee-dee-doom, dee-dee-doom, dee-dee-ding, boom. Because that was his rhythm. That was his harmonic conception. And when he played that song, it became something brand new. Now, would you call that deconstructing? Would you call it arranging? It's the same thing all jazz musicians do. Except I do it because I was a child. I'm a product of a generation where we had, we're the first generation, I think, where we grew up, and I would go hear Dexter Gordon play, and the next week I'd go hear Cecil Taylor play, and the next week I would go hear Rahsaan Roland Kirk play, and the next week I'd go hear the Art Ensemble play. But meanwhile, I could go to the record store and get, records of Malian kora players, and I could go and hear salsa bands play and listen to Los Papines on records play Cuban music. The idea of a universal musical language, but having the benefit of being at that age where I got to hear true jazz masters in their element.
It was a great time. The whole concept, the art ensemble's whole concept of great music, ancient to the future.
Absolutely.
That is the concept.
That really, I think that was one of my biggest influences. And when people hear my music, they say, well, it doesn't really sound like the AACM or the art ensemble, but one of the things I got from them was the idea is like, I never just go and play a gig. That's not really what I do. I don't show up and play standards. I never, even when I was a little young, I never wanted to do that. My idea was always make a presentation, make a statement, give something specific, create the music in a specific image. So it's never like just a song. It's always something very specific.
Air Lore was an
Air
early.
Lore was absolutely a life-changing record for
Yes.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Joplin.
Absolutely a life-changing record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other, of course, connection is that there's only one other, really, that I know of, trumpet player with a sense of humor. That was Lester Bowie.
Well, and wait a second, Dizzy.
Well, Dizzy, yes, but he didn't play funny.
You're right.
You know?
Yeah.
Lester played funny. I
sure
saw
did.
Lester turn his trumpet upside down, pour water in it, and play through the water.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Lester was a huge, I saw Lester a lot. I knew him pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, I have, the interesting thing is about any artist or any jazz musician is you have to be honest to who you are. And this is who I am. If you hang out with me, you'll find out I'm just going to sit around, tell jokes, and crack up. That's kind of, so when I play music, it's honestly who I am. And so I like to have the audience laugh, and it's very natural for me. And, but Dizzy was really good at making an audience laugh.
Yes.
And he would, even if someone in the band would play something funny, Dizzy used to sometimes do I don't know if you remember, he would sometimes do a double take, he would do that a lot, and kind of get the audience in on it, And I really, for me, it's really important, the idea of audience participation. And it's interesting because I spent the last 8 years with Levon Helm, and it kind of reinforced part of me that really believes in, like, make sure the audience don't take them, too far out. Always make sure they have the melody there. And there was an interesting story that was told at Lester's funeral. And a trumpet player from Chicago, whose name I don't remember, he's in Eight Bold Souls. You know the band Eight Bold Souls?
I don't remember his name.
Anyway, he told a story that he was in Italy, and Lester had left Chicago a long time ago, and they were on the same festival. And he asked Lester if he could have a trumpet lesson. And Lester said, sure. And they were on the coast, coast of Italy. He said, meet me at the beach, at a certain time. And Lester said, we're going to rent this little rowboat here. So the guy's in the rowboat, thinking he's going to get this, waiting for his lesson with Lester. And Lester says, just start rowing. And Lester's just sitting there in the sun, smoking a cigar. And the guy's like, okay. He's rowing and rowing. Lester's just sitting there in the sun, soaking it up, smoking his cigar, just kind of enjoying himself. And he said, man, I was rowing, and finally we get out there. I'm almost out to where the big ships are. And Lester sees that big ship and says, turn around. He turns around and is going back, and Lester says, always know when you're going too far out, come back in. That's your lesson, $50. So that's kind of my thing. Is like I want to take the audience on a journey, but I don't want to lose them. You have to know when you've taken it too far out. I mean that's only, like I said, this is just my take on it. For some other people, there are people who really don't. That's not, the audience is not really part of their equation. They're just, this is what I do. Yeah. That's who I am. I really have always wanted to feel like, pull them in, keep them, always keep them, let them, take them on a trip. It's not about pandering. It's about allowing them to take the trip with you,
I interviewed Keith Jarrett one time. I said, well, what do you think people, what do you think about what people do when they take your album home and listen to it? He said, I never thought about that.
Yeah, he didn't do too bad with that philosophy.
That's
I gotta
true.
say, but again, that's who he is.
Yeah.
You know, and everyone is who they are. And I'm sure if you spent some time with Keith Jarrett, which I never have, he'd be that person.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's talk about your band members. They're all in town for tonight.
They're all in town. 17 years, same 4 guys.
17 years. I guess you guys have it worked out by now.
It's getting better, actually. And that's the amazing thing. I mean, last night...
I asked Stanton Moore the same thing earlier this week, and he said the same thing.
Yeah.
After 17 years.
Yeah. I mean, I think last night could have been the best gig we ever played.
Wow.
Until tonight.
Huh.
I hope.
Well, can you talk about each one of them individually?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I'll tell a little bit I'll tell you this also kind of tell them about the band members and how the band came together, because what happened was I had been playing trumpet and slide trumpet, and just slide trumpet a little bit, and I'm on a straight ahead gig with a guy named Michael Blake. I don't know if you know Michael, great tenor player, and it's a really nice, good straight ahead, just playing tunes, and there's this burning bass player. I mean, this guy it's kind of frightening how good he is. And, and I really never played with a bass player this good. And after the gig, or on the break, we're kind of talking to each other. He goes, the bass player says to me, "Man, I really like that slide trumpet you play." I go, "Wow, man, thanks." I go, I'm thinking of putting together a band where I just play the slide trumpet. He goes, "Well, I'll do that with you." And I go, "Wow, really?" He goes, yeah, here's my number. And it's Tony Scher. And Tony's an incredible bass player and guitar player and singer. And really an interesting guy, was in Woody Herman's band, right out of college, did a lot of straight ahead gigs, like, he was with Dakota Staten and Al Gray, and, did a lot of really straight, was in Maria Schneider's bands for years. And just one of these guys. Yeah, like I said, the first time I played with him, I was kind of frightened. He was so good. And he's so good that Bill Frisell came to hear Sexmob about 11 years ago and stole my rhythm section. That's okay. Listen, if you're going to get your rhythm sections, I shouldn't say, because this is going to go on a podcast. Okay. He liked them so much that he called them up and offered them the best job in the world. And I got to say, it was a blessing, because what happened was, first of all, Kenny had already been playing with him, but, now he had Kenny and Tony. But first of all, it opened up my life so I could start other bands. And second of all, it gave these guys an opportunity to play with, I think, really one of the greatest musicians of the 21st century and one of the nicest people. And we all now have a relationship. We played on Frizell's Grammy-winning Unspeakable record, where I did the arrangements. Thank you. That's one of the 3 Grammys I've been involved
Unspeakable.
with. I don't want to go on too much about the 3 Grammy-winning records that
You could give us a hint.
Done the arrangements for, but there have been 3. And then Sexmob also is a Grammy-losing band. Yeah, and they give you a special medal that says
Grammy-nominated band.
No, that's Grammy-nominated is a misnomer for Grammy-losing. So anyway, that's Tony. Kenny, our incredible drummer and percussionist. I actually met Kenny when he was in 9th grade. He could have even been in 8th grade. I'm from the Bay Area originally, and I remember, we had this great. There was a guy named Phil Hardiman, and he started a jazz program in Berkeley, and a lot of great musicians. Peter Applebaum, who a lot of people know for the Hieroglyphics, and from Don Cherry, and from Daphnis Prieto's band, was kind of the linchpin of this kind of jazz program. Peter was like one of these kind of a child prodigy. And actually, Peter and Rodney Franklin. Do you remember Rodney Franklin? He had a hit jazz record in the '80s called "Innocent," and we had this great band. Out of that program have come Josh Redman, Benny Green, Ambrose Akimusiri, Jonathan Finlayson. I mean, so many musicians. I'm sure I'm forgetting. Dave Toll, who plays in Los Angeles with Jack Sheldon, Craig Handy. I mean, there's so many people. I know I'm forgetting a lot of them. But, so we were at a jazz festival. We used to win all the high school festivals. And Mr. Hardiman goes, "Hey, there's this kid who's a real good drummer. You should check him out." And I listened to him play, and he wasn't so good. And then when I came back to the Bay Area, he was now older. I came visiting. I was like a big New York guy. And they say, "Hey, that guy Kenny Wallison lives in town now. He's a pretty good drummer. You should check him out." And I listened to him, and he wasn't so good. And But I kept my, but he was like living with Peck Almond, a great multi-instrumentalist, also from Berkeley. Him and Jeff Ballard and Peck were all roommates. They were all in their early 20s. And Kenny came to New York, and man, by that time, he was real good. and he just gets better.
How did he change? What made him better?
You learn to play in time. That always helps. Especially when you play the drums.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, Kenny's always been, and Kenny's really, I mean, your band's only as good as your drummer. And I mean, Kenny's a true magician of the drums. I mean, you'll see tonight. I mean, everyone in this band is great. And the band, of course, a band is greater than, some of it's greater than its parts. Is that what they say?
Yes.
Did I say it right? But yeah, Kenny's just super magical. And I use him on, it's interesting because I use him on a lot of these projects I do with Hal Wilner where we back up all these different singers, and it's kind of amazing because we share so much information. I say, yeah, can you play, that tango beat from that record? Oh yeah. That beat from that Matt Meters record? Oh yeah. That Joe Jones thing from that Count Basie from 1937? Yeah. That Beaver Harris thing from the Cecil Taylor? Yeah. So we really share a lot of information, which is really special because it's interesting that not every musician is a huge music fan. And I am. I mean, I still buy records all the time. And Kenny's that same way. So whenever I refer to, like, that Baby Dodds thing, yeah, Not many guys you can say, the Baby Dodds thing, the Levon Helm thing, the Joe Jones thing, the Philly Joe Jones thing, what Beaver Harris, that whole world. So he's an amazing guy. And Briggen, it's really interesting. I mean, Briggen to me, Briggen Krause, our saxophone player, is really what I would call a sound innovator. And there's not a lot of them in music. I mean, there's a lot of great musicians. But most of them, you can really trace back and say, oh, he comes from this person, he comes from this person. And Briggen is a guy who really came up, figured out his own language early on, which is not the easiest thing when it comes to, people are used to saying, oh, yeah, can you do that Benny Carter thing? Can you do that Charlie Parker thing, that Cannonball thing? And I'm sure if Briggen really wanted to, he could, but he is a person who really plays in a very specific style of language he's created. And I met him I'm trying to remember what year it was, but let's see, my son's 20, so what was 20 years ago?
That would be
93.
93.
In 1993, I was up in Seattle doing a show with the Flying Karamazov Brothers, and I was going to do a concert on an off night, and the drummer was Aaron Alexander, was from Seattle, and said, "Oh," I said, who should, let's do a concert. Let's use some local guys. He said, well, there's a couple local guys who are real good. Call Avon Kang and Briggen Krause. And I guess I must have had to rent a car, or someone had a car. We go pick up Briggen. He's a good-looking young guy, and he's got these great black Doc Martens that he's like shined to like perfection. And I've always thought, I mean, here I am wearing these ridiculous shoes, but usually I look much better than this. I just got off a plane, and I've always thought a musician with good shoes, it shows like a kind of greater sense of artistic understanding. I took a look at his shoes. I said, well, I like this guy, and it was interesting because I came from being a little older than him, that a lot of the avant-garde musicians were really self-taught, and there was almost, to a lot of them, and I don't want to make too much of a generalization, there was more randomness and less science to how they approached music. And here's this guy, and he's really coming from what we would have referred to as an avant-garde style of playing saxophone, except it was completely scientific. He had total control over all his sounds, and he could read anything. Like anything you put in front of him, he could just read it. I said, man, I love the way you play. I said, when you get to New York, give me a call. So he got to New York. Kenny got to New York. I had this great bass player, and that's how I started the band.
Huh. And you did an interview with Oregon Music News, Kevin Tamanka,
right,
in which you did explain how the name came about.
Yeah.
One night in New York.
It was actually an afternoon.
It was an afternoon.
Yeah. I show up at the Knitting Factory, and they had started this a late night series, and I was going to play everything. They said to me, hey, Stephen, we're going to do this series. You want to have a night? And I said, yeah. Oh, that sounds good. I have this new project I'm doing. And they said, well, what's it called? And I said, well, I'm not sure. I said, it's a band. The original idea of this band was I want to create an environment where I could play the slide trumpet. And I want to only bring the slide trumpet so that would force me to kind of figure out what this instrument could do, because I'd only been playing it I'd play it on one or two songs that were easy on it, but I didn't really have any idea what would happen if you just played it. And I said, let's call it Steve Bernstein Slide Trumpet Quartet. Right. I take a look at the ad, and I said, God, that looks like it'd be like 4 guys playing slide trumpet. That's
right.
And we're sitting around just kind of shooting the stuff, and I say, well, okay, how about this? Stephen Bernstein, how about we'll call it Slide Mob? And like, yeah, that's a great idea. And then I said, hey, we'll call it Sex Mob. And like, that's a great idea. And I said, you'd print Sex Mob in the paper? They're like, yeah, of course. And I'm like, now I didn't know that 17 years later I'd be living with this name. I just thought, I'm doing these late night gigs. So yeah, my wife, but I did change it to Sex Mob, one word, but
doesn't matter.
But my
Does
wife
not matter.
Yeah, my wife has been bugging me about this for obviously the entire time, like because her friends were always like, what's your husband doing? He's a musician. Where is he now? Oh, he's on the road. Oh, who's on the road with his band? What's his band called? And it's like, then my wife has to go Sex Mob, So anyway, but as I told her, at least no one forgets the name of the band.
That's very true. Very true. So the slide trumpet.
Yes, sir.
It's such a strange instrument. I mean, nobody else plays it, right?
Well, there are actually a bunch of young people now starting to play
because of
it.
you.
Yeah,
I know, right?
Yeah, and there's one guy an Italian in France named Luca Bonvini who started it a little bit after I did, but kind of taking the opposite approach that I do. But
what is your approach?
My approach is to make it as vocal as possible and really utilize the slide, because anything that I need to play like a trumpet, I can play it on a trumpet.
Yeah.
So the idea is, here's an instrument where I'm trying to do everything a trumpet can't do. And Luca was a classical trombone player, and what he was trying to do was figure out a way to play contemporary classical music, but be able to play faster. And he realized that a violin player could play faster than a cello player. So he thought, well, if I play the next instrument smaller, I could have the same relationship, cello to violin, as trombone to slide trumpet. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my whole thing with the instrument is I have this slide. Every single part of the slide, there's what's called an overtone series. So I'm not so interested in trying to get notes the way you would on a piano or a trumpet, but realize that all along the slide is an unlimited amount of notes. So a lot of what happens is just kind of just letting the slide tell the story. And then my influences are really, like the swing trombone players. My influences are, Dickie Wells and Vic Dickinson and J.C. Higginbotham, and really utilizing the idea of brass as being a very expressive instrument, and just try to make it as expressive as possible.
Can you tailgate with a slide trumpet?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. In fact, when I go to it's interesting because I go to New Orleans a lot. Mm-hmm. In fact, the guys in Galactic are like, come by and play. We're playing till 12:30, and they love, and the guys in it's interesting when you're, with New Orleans, it's funny. There's a thing in New Orleans when you come down as a trumpet player. And I try to explain to people about a lot of the things in New Orleans, it's not a white-black thing. It's like a Yankee and Southerner thing.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
If you're like a Yankee and you come down to New Orleans and play their traditional music, you're stepping into some big shoes.
Yeah.
And as a trumpet player, you're stepping into these guys' shoes who grew up listening to and playing traditional New Orleans trumpet their entire life.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you something, man, you got to be careful because they will eat you alive. But you go down there with a slide trumpet, man, and they love me. I mean, I go there, everyone I sit in with the Dirty Dozen, and, every band's like, yo, and even if they don't know me, like, you're that guy with the slide trumpet, come up and play. And all the old guys come up to me like, son, you know that New Orleans is a brass town, right? I said, yes, sir, I know that. He goes, son, I've been watching bash bands my whole life. I said, I'm sure you have, sir. He goes, son, I've never seen anyone play that instrument. I goes, I know you haven't. And so there was like, to like come down there and play a brass instrument that no one in New Orleans figured out how to play. I get a lot of love there. So.
Wow, do you still have to stand on one bank
Yeah.
and be heard on the other side of the Mississippi?
I could do that.
Buddy Bolden did.
Yeah, I know.
That's not true, but it's still a great
It's
story.
a good story, yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I definitely can do some tailgating.
Yeah. Where do you get one of these?
Well, you can actually get them anywhere.
Really?
They're available. There's commercially available. In fact, there's a guy I haven't tried his. There's a well-known trump player, Marcinkowitz, here in Portland, who makes one, which I haven't tried.
Really?
Yet. I called him up. I said, he made a very, high, very beautifully looking. I'd heard they made a slide trumpet. I called him up. I said, who tried? Did anyone test your slide trumpet? And they go like, yeah, so and so works at the shop. And I said, did you think of having like a professional slide trumpet player check it out? But so I assume it's a good instrument, but I mean, the thing is, most of the slide trumpets have been made like as if you took a trombone and shrunk it. And that really doesn't work because a trombone goes over your shoulder. And if you do that, then the instrument goes right into your cheek. And the thing about the trumpet, as any trumpet player will tell you, it's a difficult instrument. And a slide trumpet, as Don Byron once said to me, when I started playing the slide trumpet, he looked at me and goes, what, the trumpet isn't difficult enough? It's a really one of the reasons, it's been around forever. I mean, there's pictures of Louis Armstrong with a slide trumpet. There's pictures of Freddie Keppard with a slide trumpet.
Wow.
And I read every book I could and listened to every recording, and I did find references to Louis actually playing it. He did play it, as did King Oliver. And they said that he could play it fairly well. And there was a guy, Doc Cheatham told me that he knew people who played it in the 1920s, and most of them were made as novelty instruments. So they weren't really built to do what I do, which is actually play it all night and play it the next night and really play it. You need to have an instrument where it's away from your face and the bell's forward. The instrument I had was built for me, and it's built so it can really fit your face. But as far as I know, mine's the only one built like that.
Wow. Have you checked in with David Monette?
I don't think Dave's has built one yet. I think
No, I don't think he has
But
either.
and I don't think I could afford it if he did.
He's built some left-handed trumpets.
He's built all kinds of incredible instruments.
Yeah.
I mean, David is he's a wizard.
Yes.
As is Marcinkowitz. I mean, these guys are all wizards. But David. I mean, the instrument he built for the G trumpet he built for Ron Miles,
Right.
which Ron isn't playing right now. But no,
Yeah.
David is I guess they both. It's kind of interesting. They have two incredible trumpet makers right in this area.
Yeah. He built a left-handed trumpet for Ingrid Jensen, and then she decided not to use it
Wow.
because she would have to take a year off to learn how to replay it.
Well, the interesting thing is I saw Ingrid's new trumpet, which she sounds unbelievable on. She's
Yeah.
like, I said, well, Ingrid, can I do your trumpet? You can't touch the bell. You can't touch the bell. The metal's too soft. And, and I said, Ingrid, it's okay. I'm not going to, There's a bit of a cult around these trumpets. That's, I think it's like, whatever. I always tell people, if you're happy with your instrument, that's the most important thing. Who am I to judge?
Really. We are here at the Oregon Jewish Museum, and
Yeah.
we should talk about your Jewish music,
Yeah.
which is really interesting. How did that? Who was first, you or Zorn?
Oh, Zorn, absolutely. Well, here's the story. It's an interesting story. Zorn came to me now I've known John since I was 19 years old, and when he put together Zodic Records, he came up to me at a concert and said, "Stephen, I really want you to make a Jewish record." And he called it Radical Jewish Culture. And I said, "John, I thought about it. I said, thanks a lot. I'll think about it." And at the time, I hadn't made a record with my own name on it. I'd had Spanish Fly Records, which was my first group, the collective I had, which was trumpet, slide guitar, and tuba. And we toured a lot in Europe. And I don't know if we came to Portland, but we played Seattle and played San Francisco. And I guess Sexmob was already working. Maybe we had a record out at that point. I just felt like a little weird about having the first record under my own name be a Jewish record. I mean, I don't want to be identified as a Jewish musician. I just want to be like the same thing about the films. I'm just a musician. I like the same thing. Even though it's film music, to me it's just music. That's why I didn't want to watch the films. I just want the music. And that's the same way I felt about Jewish music. I was like, I don't want to be known as a Jewish. I mean, I'm just a musician. That's what I do. I play music. I don't really care if it's Jewish. I don't care if it's Christian. It's music. And I started to think about it. I said, well, geez, he is willing to pay for a record. Maybe I should do it. So I called him up. I said, John, I got this idea. I told him the idea. He goes, yeah, I don't like that idea. Okay. So I run into maybe I ran to Dave Liebman at a festival and had this. We were talking about the idea of a Jewish music idea, record. And I thought of another idea. So I called back, came home, got off the plane. Next day I called Zorn, I got another idea. No, I don't like that idea. Okay. I was talking to another friend of mine, kind of experimental musician, and we were talking about it. And I had an idea about doing something with him. So I called up John. I said, John, I got another idea for a Jewish record. He's like, yeah, I don't like that idea. So I was like, well, screw it. I mean, I'm definitely not going to make a Jewish record. And I'm sitting backstage. I'm sitting back at a wedding, a Jewish wedding. And it wasn't a Jewish wedding, but it was a wedding for Jewish people. And, you play like whatever. First you play the bossa novas, and then you play the swing music. And then it was a time where you play the Jewish music, and everyone does the horror, and usually about a half an hour horror set. So I hadn't played a wedding for a while, so I was backstage kind of running through all the melodies in my head, because if you're the trumpet player, you have to play the melody. So I'm going through the melodies. I've been listening to a lot of New Orleans music. And I started to play Husin Kala Mazel Tov, which goes ba 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 bee bee ba bee ba 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 bee bee ba 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 ba. But I've been listening to all this New Orleans music. I go ba 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 bee ba bee ba 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 ba. And I realized, man, this is St. James Infirmary. and I realized, well, if you take this music and you slow it down and put another groove on it, you could really do something different with it. So I got home. Next morning I called up John and said, John, I got this idea. You take the music, we're going to mix it with New Orleans music and with Afro-Cuban percussion. And he goes, I love it. I'm sending you a check right now. So I made the first record, and it was really a successful record. I mean, it sold a lot of copies, for a small record, really kind of made a dent on it, and it kind of changed Jewish music, because since then a lot of people have taken Jewish music, slowed it down, put it to Afro-Cuban grooves, put it to New Orleans grooves, and then John was like, "What's your next record?" I said, "Well, when I think about it, let me think about it." And I was listening to Jewish. I was thinking, at the time I was playing a lot with Sexmob, and I was really touring, and people started referring to me as slide trumpet player Stephen Bernstein. I said, okay. Again, I don't want to be defined as anything. I definitely don't want to be defined as a slide trumpet. I said, I'm going to make a record as a trumpet player. So that was the first thing I said. Okay, trumpet. And I was listening to this record by a cantor named, whose record was it? Oh, Kusevitsky. And a friend of mine walks in and says, oh, that's Kusevitsky record. Eric Lawrence was a great saxophone player, and he's the son of Arnie Lawrence. And he said, yeah, my dad had that record. He goes, they said that like Coltrane used to go check out Kusevitsky. I said, wow. It made sense, because Coltrane was always like trying to find out about devotional music and religious music, and there wasn't that much stuff you could really hear, and Kusevitsky was a really well-known cantor, and kind of got me thinking about the idea of the connection between kind of Coltrane's very later, very spiritual religious music and the way the singers like Kusevitsky would sing these very long prayers that would build to these beautiful climaxes. I said, God, I want to do something like that. So using that kind of late period Coltrane rhythm section, I said, and I wanted to play the trumpet, and I didn't want it to sound like a New York record, because everyone in New York makes records. And we've been doing all these shows with Sam Rivers Trio. And I was called up my friends in Sam's Trio, the rhythm section. I said, hey, you guys, I want to come down to Florida. I want to make a record with you guys and use you guys as a rhythm section. And they said, that's great. So I made the plans. And as I got closer, I said, hey, what do you think? You think Sam would play on it? They said, well, we'll give him a call. So I call up Sam. I said, and Sam's like, hey, and I don't know if you guys know who Sam Rivers is, but he passed about 2 years ago, but he was really one of the great influential saxophone players. He's an interesting guy, because he played with everybody from Miles Davis to Cecil Taylor to Dizzy Gillespie to Tad Dameron to McCoy Tyner, but basically liked playing his own music. and liked to improvise. He was one of the first free musicians, but he wasn't a free. He was older than he was Dizzy's age, but he was, they thought about him in the same way they thought about people like Archie Shepp, because he liked to play improvised music, and he didn't feel like he needed to be. He liked to improvise. Anyway, so I call up Sam. Sam's like, "Hey, Steve, I heard you're coming down." I said, "Yes, Sam, I'm making a record with your trio, with your band." And I said, "I don't have a lot of money. I have X amount of money." And I said, would you come and would you play a song with me? I mean, whatever you're comfortable with, 1 or 2 songs. It'd be an honor to have you on the record. And he said, well, how long are you coming for? I said, well, I'm coming for 2 days. We're going to record. He goes, well, I'd love to be on the record. So I got to make a record with Sam Rivers. And it was really, I just took the idea of these long prayers, and Sam is an incredible guy, a real professional. And we're playing these Jewish prayers. I had them all written out, and then I basically transcribed the prayers. And when it got very kind of fevered, then I'd say, okay, this is where the improvising section is. And Sam just played it so well. And I said, after the first couple of songs, I said, Sam, it's amazing how well you're like interpreting this Jewish music. I said, have you listened to a lot of music like this? He goes, Stephen, prayer is prayer. It was very interesting. And then the next record I made in L.A. I decided to kind of make a record thinking about all the Jewish immigrants who had left during the war and moved to L.A. and became film writers. Almost all those film writers were Eastern European Jews who were escaping Nazis. And they had all had this traditional education. And then there was this whole thing about the West Coast guys. I knew that Shelley Mann was Jewish, but I didn't know that Shorty Rogers was Jewish. Yeah.
Nobody knows that.
Well, obviously his name was not Shorty or Rogers.
Right.
And the interesting thing is that Shorty Rogers and Shelley Mann met in the Catskills when they were teenagers.
Jeez.
Yeah. And then anyway, so I made these 4 records, and I just recently did a new project with Arturo Farrell's Afro-Latin Jazz Ensemble, and took all my Jewish music and arranged it with kind of in the spirit of Chico Farrell's arrangements, with these huge Afro-Latin versions of them. So it keeps going.
It's funny. You talk about putting things in a different context. People used to really laugh at Edmundo Rose. Edmundo Rose was like a kind of a lounge orchestra leader in the 50s and the early 60s. And he would take Porgy and Bess and put it to all Latin beats. He did The Sound of Music and merengues.
Wow.
And it was pretty weird. But it's and the thing is, he wasn't taken seriously.
Right.
But he would be now.
He sure would. Yeah.
Let's open up for some questions. Anybody have any questions? Don't all raise your hands at once. Good question. She wanted to hear something about Nino Rota.
Well, well, that's interesting to say that. There's a connection between everything in Jewish music. That's the amazing thing about this music. Nino Rota was, I don't know how many people know this, but he was a child prodigy. He was born in Bari, and he actually ended up going back there and teaching at the school where he was taught. He was writing symphonies, as a teenager. And he went to the United States and studied it at Curtis. And I kind of think, I couldn't find any documentation on this, but I kind of think he was there during the swing era. And I really think, because I hear not only, Jewish music, I think, is a real universal thing. And that's what I found out about doing these records. If you put Jewish music over New Orleans music, it sounds like New Orleans music. There's something about one thing I learned from playing, I'm going to digress for 1 second, with Levon Helm, is that there's basically one song, one universal song that connects all music. And if you know that song, you can play anything. There's one song. And that's what you're hearing in Nino Rota, because his music, the thing that makes his music, his melodies so powerful and so beautiful is it's connected to that one song. And it's interesting. Someone was listening to us play and said, "Wow, I noticed that there's a part of this one thing, and I guess it's in Amarcord." He goes, it's the middle section of Kurt Weill's something from Three Penny Opera, but not Mac the Knife, the drinking song, the bridge section. And I said, well, yes, it's the same thing. If you hear the Italians playing it, it doesn't sound like this. It's Kurt Weill. If you hear me playing it, it sounds like Kurt Weill. There's also a section that sounds like Mac the Knife, but it doesn't sound like Mac the Knife when the Italians play it because the way they interpret it. You know, we're talking about going back to the idea we said about people's voices and people's rhythms. The Italian rhythm and the Italian articulation is kind of different than this kind of more the thing we do in jazz music, which is a little more lusty, a little more kind of vocal, you know, so Nina Rota's music, it has this incredible combination of these melodies that are so, they almost sound like you've already heard them. They're so perfect, but then they have this strange chromaticism in them, which also I think is what reminds me of Duke Ellington. There's like this little chromaticism, and that just comes from who he was as a person, obviously, how his outlook on the world. I mean, the melody really unfolds, and as it's unfolding, suddenly there's this little turn, but the turn is so natural. It's not like, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to put a funny turn there. It's like, that's just naturally how it goes, and all his melodies are like that, and the way. There you go. That's
she said walking through time.
Yeah. And I think that's why Fellini, you know, loved him so much. Fellini talked about the first time he met him. He said that he's waiting for the bus, and he sees this odd-looking man who's standing not at the bus stop. He's standing like 40 feet away, and he wants to tell the man that's not where the bus stop is, but he doesn't really say anything. And they're waiting there, and the bus stops in front of him. And that's how he met Nina Rota. The bus spots and he said, Nina Rota was the kind of guy that really like lived from music, lived on his own terms. And you know, Fellini was such a surrealist, but at the same time a very person who always had scripts that he worked off of. He didn't just come in with nothing. He always had a script, full scripts and full stories, and then he improvised. And I kind of get the feeling that from Nina Rota's melodies, I don't really know, I can't say that I know this was his work ethic, but you know, that same idea, it's like you can hear how the melody's starting, and then when it starts to go, there's really that feeling of he's letting it improvise. He's not taking it to the obvious place. He's letting kind of the dream take over, you know? And would you agree with that? Right. There you go.
Would have been nice to have been in the room to hear their conversations.
Yeah. But to be honest, I don't think Fellini. I don't know when I read Fellini's memoirs. I don't know how many conversations they had. I think he just let Nina Rota do what he was going to do. It really seemed like he just gave Nina Rota freedom to write this stuff.
So he gave Rota the film.
Yeah,
it wasn't the other way around.
He gave Nina Rota the film.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't think Fellini gave him much instructions. I think he let Nina Rota's imagination just go.
Okay. Well, let's see. Tonight.
Yeah.
Tonight. Is it going to be all Nina Rota?
Well, it usually hasn't been, but with one set, I don't think it's going to be all Nina. It's going to be, I would say, 83% Nina Rota. You know, because we are, you know, I mean, I do like to, one of the great things about this band is someone will just like make a little statement and then we're like, oh yeah, let's do that. And we might just play that. Yeah. So we often just kind of, you know, venture down the river, you know, take a little tributary and then we connect with the main river later. But yeah.
And the new album will be available tonight?
The new record, the new CD is available. There will be an LP, which is not available yet.
Okay.
But there will be an LP.
Also, you have an album out with the Millennial Territory Orchestra. What does that mean?
What does that mean?
Yes.
Well, the idea was
the name.
Okay. Well, the band came together. It's a great thing about when Bill Frisell absconded with my rhythm section. I had this great, very successful Friday night gig at Tonic, which was like always packed. We'd play every Friday at midnight. So suddenly I have a gig but no band. So I said, okay, well, now I have an opportunity. I'm always that kind of guy. Like, this is good. And I had done the Robert Altman film, Kansas City, and I'd been thinking about territorial orchestras. It's like my job with that film originally was to study the territory music and be kind of like the person on the film, continuity person, but in a musical sense. And the idea, like, I would listen and say, okay, that's good. No, what you're doing isn't really right for that style. It would be more in because these guys were all modern musicians, and my idea, and I ended up being the arranger for the film as well. But that kind of became a necessity. So, but when my job, I was being paid to listen to Kansas City territory bands for 3 months before the film. I got a paycheck every week, a paycheck and a box of cassettes every week.
Tough gig.
Yeah, listen to this music. So, and then it was like I got hooked, and I kept like just wanting to listen to more and more of this music, and it was this incredible period. It wasn't like New Orleans music, it wasn't like big band music, but it had aspects of both. But but it oftentimes had a violin, and it didn't have a full reed section. It had a small reed section, 3 reeds, usually 1 trombone, 2 trumpets, and 1 trumpet and a violin. And I said, well, you know what? Why don't I put together a band that's orchestrated like these bands, and see what would happen because no one uses a band like that. You're either a big band or you're a small band, or you're a little New Orleans combo. But you don't really find a lot of bands with 3 reeds, a violin, a trumpet, and a trombone. And I had a banjo originally. And I said, let me put together a band like this and just see what happens. And so I put together this band. It was 1999. So Millennial Territory Orchestra. And we started off by playing all songs from that period. Basically, the period I was looking at was 1925 to 1937. And then one day, in my head, I hear this version of Signed, Sealed, Delivered by Stevie Wonder. This is embarrassing. I was walking through a mall. But I'm starting to hear this arrangement in my head. And go home, write out the arrangement, play it that night. It's perfect. It's Signed, Sealed, Delivered, but not like Ricky Ticky in the style, but honestly in the style, because we're playing it, for a live audience who are like revved up on a Friday night. It's 12:30 at night. Everyone's been drinking and whatever else, and I suddenly realize, well, now I can do anything I want with this band. I now understand the key. I know what this music is. I can take any kind of song, and so our newest record is all Sly and the Family Stones music.
Right.
Yeah, but played by a band that's set up like a band from 1927. But not trying to make the music corny or Ricky Ticky. It's just, this is what the instruments are.
You've been a fan of Sly for a long time, have you?
Since I was, I guess, yeah. I mean, I grew up in the Bay Area, and and I remember that, music on the radio, and I remember my next door neighbors were Black Panthers. And
Did you ever hear him on the radio?
Who?
Sly.
No, that was, when he was, I'll tell you something interesting. That was actually before my time.
Yeah.
But my trumpet teacher, John Coppola, who 80, I guess is John 84 now, 83, 84, still plays, one of the last of the guys. John played with everybody. John was in Stan Kenton's band and Billy May's band and Woody's band when you would sit in a section and it would be like Gazzo and the Candoli brothers and Maynard and Art Pepper and Lee Konitz and Shelley. He was like one of those guys, and is one of those guys. And he tells stories about Sly would write his own commercials for the radio show, and he'd call in guys. This is before real rock and roll, so he's still using a lot of horns. He said Sly was like Mozart. He said he could sing everybody their parts. And when I started to learn more about music, I realized, well, one thing is you can say it's like Mozart, and the other thing is it's like gospel singers. Because if you ever work with gospel singers, they can sing all the harmony parts. They say, okay, you sing this note, you sing this note, you sing this note. And Sly was a child gospel singer. The Family Stone was actually him and his brother and his sister, when they were like little kids, would go to churches and sing. And then he did learn music. Interesting about Sly is that Sly went to college, learned music theory, and if you ever hear interviews with him, especially at the beginning when he was more coherent, he always talked about his music teacher in college, his music theory teacher, and he talked about how important counterpoint is. And I think as a musician, when you listen to Sly's music, and that's one of the things that separates it from things like music of that era that's doesn't have that kind of mind behind it is there's always counterpoint. There's always melodic counterpoint in his music. And I love Sly since I was a kid.
So is that CD available tonight too?
I didn't bring it with me.
Okay.
It's available on.
Okay. On this post
Yeah.
that the podcast will be on, there will be a link.
Great.
There you go. Any more questions? Okay.
Okay.
Well, I think it's time for you to get a rest.
Why not?
Stephen Bernstein, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tom.
This podcast will be available in an hour or two. And thank you all. Go hear Steve tonight and listen to all the other podcasts and tell your friends. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.